morning, everybody, and thanks for having me. This is really fun. I'm doing more Rotary now than ever, and I'm just enjoying this so much. So thank you so much for having me. These certainly are unprecedented times, for sure. This is like nothing we've ever experienced, and it's kind of like the first time in my life where I've seen the entire world kind of on equal playing field, that we're all, you know, in this together, doing the same thing, fighting the same thing. So it's really unusual. Well, and that, though, in and of itself is creating kind of a tidal wave of this 24/7, 7 days a week, you know, nothing but COVID-19 information. So I'm seeing that a lot of people are just feeling very overwhelmed by that and almost out of control. So today I want to give you some psychological tips on how you can regain your sense of control and how you can decrease any feelings of being overwhelmed or anxiety. And if this isn't, you know, something that's affecting you in that way, you may know someone else who feels overwhelmed or anxious, and so these tips can be passed along. And I did see that you were recording this, I think you said, so that's awesome. And I'll pass on this to others, this link to others that I think might be able to use it too. So. All right, so what are we in control of? You know, from the time we're born, I think we're kind of in denial about having control of our lives. We're really not in control of very much at all. From the time you're born, like who you're born to, what family you're born into, how tall you're going to be, what neighborhood you're going to live in as a child. All of these things are really outside of all of our control, but there are some things that we can control. And the first one is our thought patterns. So typically speaking, we have two types of thought patterns: positive thinking and negative thinking. And in a situation like we're in right now, you may find that you're having a lot of negative thoughts, even the kind of what if thinking, a lot of future oriented thinking. And the negative thought patterns can begin to actually cause depression in folks and cause anxiety. So I want to give you a little trick on how you can actually flip your thinking into a positive thought within 30 seconds. So again, if you catch yourself all of a sudden, you're feeling really like, oh, just all this negativity, I want you to tell yourself to first, like a parent, stop. I want you to use your parent voice. And if you're not a parent, then use the one that your mother used with you. You know it. Stop. Just stop that right now. We call that literally thought stopping. And then I want you to do a little trick. And all of you will need a little piece of paper right now, or any kind of paper and pencil. And I want you all to grab that, and in the next 10 seconds, you only get 10 seconds, on my go, I want you to write down something you're grateful for. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay. Look at that, what you wrote down, and notice how that makes you feel. Notice what it starts to do to your face. Notice how it kind of loosens up your jawline. You start to feel yourself smile a little bit. Okay, now before I'm going to tell you what that does, we're going to do the next component. Now I want you all to lean into your cameras as close as you can get. And I want you to smile until I tell you to stop. 1, 2, 3, go. Look at everybody smiling. All right, and stop. Okay, those two things, what you just did, released dopamine in your brain. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter chemical that is responsible for happiness. And when we're feeling low, the dopamine levels are also low. So by doing the gratitude check and then a smile, even if you have to force a smile in the mirror, and it's best if you do it if you're looking at yourself, because it actually, this reflecting back of seeing a smile, it exponentially releases dopamine. So if you do these two things, you can actually re-stimulate the dopamine cycle in your brain and start to feel a sense of happiness again. And that flips thinking from negative to positive, because you're actually thinking about something positive in your life. Gratitude is one of the strongest positive thoughts you can have. So that's my tip, little one, and you can pass it on to anyone. You can do this every day. All right, number 2. The next thing you can control is information, at least how much information you're getting. Would you all agree that right now COVID-19 is like a fire hose of information, and it's just being blasted at us? So I would suggest to you that you absolutely limit your COVID-19 information to 2 times per day. Start your day off with it with a reliable only source, perhaps only your state source. Or whatever news source that you like, that you believe is reliable, and start with just a limited amount in the morning of just a few minutes to get what you need to enter your day. What's important, has something changed from yesterday that changes our circumstances just slightly? And then there's no need to pick up the phone and look at all these other things for the rest of the day until later on in the afternoon, because probably not that much has changed that's going to need to really impact you. So at the end of the day, look at it again, get the same news source or perhaps a different news source, get whatever information you may need for you or loved ones, and then put it down. I usually tell my clients that information is power, and that information is a good thing. But in this type of a situation, it's actually a negative. And I'm hearing that people are just so overwhelmed because of the amount of time they're spending on this. So again, I'm going to be your parent. Stop. Just stop it. Stop looking at it. You really don't need to. All right. The next thing you can do that you do have control over is self-care. So most of us are working from home, and most of us are saying, well, you know, what are we going to do for the next 30 days? This is not the time to give up on yourselves. This is not the time to become a binge drinker, or I'm like a low carb person. This is not the time for me to binge like crazy on carbohydrates and eat all the baked bread that is showing up on my doorstep. You know, this is a time for me to stay healthy, healthier than ever. Stress affects you physically. So and stress dehydrates you as well. So I want you to really think about water intake on a day-to-day basis. I want you to write down what your water goal is going to be for the day. I would recommend no less than 60 ounces. I would recommend you write down what your nutrition goal is each day, and also what your exercise goal is each day, even if that means just taking a walk. And also scheduling ourselves now is kind of weird because we are home all the time. So we may need to think about how do we schedule our lives so that we're not inundated with that sameness. You know, I'm working a lot from my dining room table. So if I schedule myself for 8 hours at this table, when I come home, I come back to my table. So what I would like you to do is to actually chunk your day into 2-hour increments, so that at a 2-hour mark, just like you would at work, get up and take a break. Move to a different room in the house if you have that luxury. Go outside for 10 minutes and just break that monotony up, just like you would at work if you were to take a few-minute break. Do the same at home. And again, keeping a schedule of what you're going to be doing every 2 hours is super important, because humans do so much better when they know what is expected of themselves. Or just like children, you know how children do better when they know what their expectations of them are? Same thing go for adults. We really don't grow up that quick. So knowing what's expected of your day will make you feel more successful at the end of your day, and will actually increase your productivity. So routine, self-care. All right. Another thing that you can do to feel like you have feeling less overwhelmed and less anxious, maybe less irritable, is to make a decision for yourself as to how you're going to handle this time. I know not everybody is as privileged as Rotarians are, and I am by no means downplaying the devastating costs that this virus and this situation and the consequences that this is going to have. However, we can still decide that we can go through this with dignity and with grace, and that we maybe even can come out of this a better person, a better Rotarian, a better family member, a better friend. So decide what you want to get out of this. Decide what you want to look like when you're finished with this. Decide if you can maybe gain some new skill or learn something from this process. For me, I do have a little extra downtime on my hands, as I'm not needing to manage my business so much since there's not anybody kind of trafficking in and out. And so I've decided to take a master class online. I'm a big fan of David Sedaris. He's an author, and I want to learn how to write better and do speeches in a different way. So I'm taking a speech writing course, a story writing course. Decide what you want out of this. Decide that you are going to use this for the better versus failing to use it, so that at the end of all of this time, you have no regrets about the way you spent your time. Again, that's something you actually can control. Now, if these short little tips aren't doing it for you and you're still feeling like you or someone you know is having too much anxiety and still feeling overwhelmed and irritable and maybe physically fatigued more than usual, I'm going to give you a couple things that you can do that we use in session and that I give for people to take home with them for self-help when dealing with anxiety. First, let me explain to you where anxiety happens in the brain. So your frontal lobe is responsible for thinking, executive functioning, problem solving, and coping. In the back of your brain, there's this little tiny piece of your brain called the amygdala. It's kind of shaped like an almond. And the amygdala is responsible for housing the anxiety response, the fight, flight, or freeze response. So when you become anxious or when you become fearful, your amygdala is basically sounding the fire alarm that something is wrong. And that will cause you to either fight, flight, or freeze. And that causes a physiological response in the body that we all recognize as anxiety. And people who have anxiety diagnoses and or panic disorders or panic attacks, they usually have a hyperactive amygdala sounding off for everything, even little tiny things that you really shouldn't fear. They're making it like it's this huge thing. So you can actually train your amygdala to turn itself off. And there are two really good ways to do that. The first one is deep breathing. Now, by show of hands, who has ever done deep breathing techniques or think they know what it's all about? Just a couple of you, okay. And some of us have heard about it, but never actually needed to do it. This is how it should not look. It's actually not a deep breath. That's not how we do deep breathing in session. So I'm going to teach you how to do a deep breath, okay? This is how I train all my clients. So on my count of 3, I'm going to do it, and you're going to see how slow it is. First, you inhale through the nose, and you always exhale through the mouth. So here I go. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to hold my breath. And all right, did you notice how slow that was? Painfully slow. But what that does is it oxygenates your whole system, and again, it stimulates serotonin and dopamine and calming neurotransmitters to your brain. So we're actually all going to do this together. So we practice it one time together. All right, on my count of 3, in through the nose slow, out through the mouth slow, and hold your breath in between. 1, 2, 3, in. And I've become really good at doing it super slow. Holding and exhale. Okay, now notice how you feel. I ask you all to do this because I want you to do a little biofeedback. How did that make you feel? You should have a physiological response to the deep breath. And usually I tell my clients to do it 2 to 3 times, but do it seated, because on the third one, you can get a little lightheaded, which isn't a bad thing, but I want you to be seated when you do it so nobody gets hurt. So I would like you to practice this. Do it 2 or 3 times when you get off of this meeting, and then do a biofeedback check. Check to notice how you feel different, how it feels different in your face, in your head, and in your body. It should have a very calming response. So that turns the amygdala off pretty well, but if that doesn't work, I'm going to teach you another way, and this is called bilateral sound therapy. And I'm using this with about 90% of my clients for just a dozen different reasons. It is helpful for sleep problems, anxiety, depression, irritability, focus and concentration. I mean, you name it, this technique is so powerful. I'm going to share my screen so that you know who my favorite guy is. If I can find him. Where did he go? That's not it. All right, I'll come back to that. Let's see here. Let me see if I can. Here we go. All right, let's see if I can get this up. Okay, my favorite guy is David Grand. And he terms it bilateral sound. You can take a screenshot of this if you'd like with your phone or what have you. Most people just call it bilateral sound. I think David Grand's music and nature sounds are by far some of the best I've ever heard. So I just love his product. So that's who I recommend. And that's who I use in therapy with my clientele. But you can go to YouTube or you can go to iTunes, Spotify, any of that, and find bilateral sound and use it. Now, here's how you use it. So you take your earbuds and you plug in, and then you close your eyes. And as you listen to the music, you're going to hear, or the nature sounds, you're going to hear it in one ear and then the next, one ear and then the next, one ear and then the next. And you're going to notice that your eyes begin to track it, kind of going back and forth. And as that occurs, what's happening is a brain wave is actually occurring that crosses the midline of the two hemispheres. And that brain wave turns the amygdala off. It's like the two cannot play in the sand together. So that within 3 to 6 minutes, usually, the amygdala begins to just turn itself off like a dimmer switch. And when that happens, the frontal lobe lights back up, coping skills come into play, problem solving is reignited, and a heavy sense, positively heavy sense of calm is induced. So that is my, super powerful trick for reducing feelings of being overwhelmed and anxiety and irritability. And again, it really helps with sleep too. Most of the time when my patients are using it, I leave the room, and a lot of times when I come back, I have to wake them up. So, and that's even after a panic attack or something. So it's really powerful. And if you know someone that, or yourself, that this still isn't working for, you still feel like you need more, believe me, therapists are available like never before. And you can find a therapist immediately in your hometown by going to psychologytoday.com. And there's a little link called Find a Therapist, and you just punch in your hometown or your zip code, and it'll populate pictures and websites for all the therapists in your area. So that's at Psychology Today, Find a Therapist. So pass that information on to anybody that you know that might need it. And we're all doing telemedicine, so it's easy to get to us as you need. So those are kind of my hot tips for the day in under 20 minutes.